They want me to talk about the whistles. After 40 years, they still want to know about the goddamn whistles. I was 22 when I enlisted in 1917. Farm boy from Iowa, never been further than Des Moines. When Wilson said we were going over there, I believed it all. Make the world safe for democracy. The war to end all wars. My mother cried when I signed up, but my father shook my hand, said I was doing the right thing. I remember the send-off parade in town, girls throwing flowers, bands playing. I thought I looked sharp in that uniform, thought I was going on some great adventure. We all did. The reality hit somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic. Ship full of farm boys and factory workers, most of us green as grass, and the officers telling us what we were sailing into. Trenches, barbed wire, gas. But nothing they said prepared us. Words can't do it. You have to smell it, hear it, feel it in your bones. We landed in France in March of 1918. Spring offensive was starting up. They rushed us through training, couple weeks of drills, and then straight to the front lines. I was assigned to the 42nd Division. We called ourselves the Rainbow Division because we came from all over the country. First time I saw the trenches, I couldn't believe men were living like that. Mud up to your knees, rats the size of cats, the smell of death so thick you could taste it. And the noise, always the noise. Artillery in the distance, rifles cracking, men coughing from the gas that hung in the air even days after an attack. But the whistles, nobody told me about the whistles. Those whistles meant one thing, over the top. And every man who heard them knew that some of us weren't coming back. My first time hearing it was outside Chateau Thierry in June. We'd been in the trenches for 2 weeks. Constant shelling, snipers picking off anyone stupid enough to poke their head up. We were exhausted, filthy, barely human anymore. The order came down the line around dawn. We were going over. Attack scheduled for 0600 hours. The sergeants moved through, checking weapons, telling us to fix bayonets. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely attach mine. I was standing next to a kid named Eddie Kowalski from Chicago. Couldn't have been more than 19. He kept touching this photograph in his pocket. His sweetheart back home. I'm gonna marry her when I get back, he told me. Gonna buy a little house, have some kids. I nodded. Didn't know what else to say. Then came the preparatory barrage. Our artillery opened up, trying to soften their lines. The ground shook. The noise was beyond anything natural, like standing inside a thunderstorm made of metal and fire. We crouched in the trench, pressed against the mud walls, waiting. 5 minutes to go. The shelling stopped. Sudden silence, worse than the noise. You could hear men breathing, praying, crying. An officer was throwing up in the corner. Nobody said anything about it. Then I heard it. That first whistle. Sharp, clean, cutting through everything. The lieutenant's whistle, signaling the first wave. I wasn't in the first wave, thank God. We watched them climb the ladders, scramble over the sandbags, watched them run into that hell. The German machine guns opened up immediately. Men were falling before they made it 10 yards. Some were screaming. Some just dropped silent. 2 minutes later, our whistle blew. My legs moved on their own. I don't remember deciding to climb that ladder. Your body just does it because stopping means court-martial, means getting shot by your own officers for cowardice. So you go. I went over the top. The world became noise and smoke and the smell of cordite. Explosions throwing up geysers of mud and body parts. I was running, stumbling, falling, getting up, running again. And all I could hear, even over the guns, was that whistle still echoing in my head. No Man's Land wasn't land at all. It was a moonscape. Craters filled with water and blood and things I won't describe. Barbed wire everywhere, some of it still wrapped around bodies from previous attacks. The wire would catch your uniform, your flesh, and you'd have to tear yourself free while the machine guns found their range. I saw Eddie go down about halfway across. He didn't make a sound, just crumpled. I kept running. What else could I do? The smoke was so thick you couldn't see more than a few feet. Men were screaming for medics, for their mothers, for God. The machine gun fire was constant, that chattering death rattle. Bullets cracking past your head, whining off rocks, thudding into the men around you. I made it to a shell crater and threw myself in. There were 3 other guys already there, faces black with mud and powder. One was gut shot, holding his stomach, blood seeping through his fingers. He was asking for water. We didn't have any. We stayed in that crater for I don't know how long. Every time we tried to move forward, the machine guns would open up. We were pinned, stuck between our lines and theirs, in the middle of hell. The wounded man stopped talking after a while, just stared at the sky. Then he wasn't staring at anything. A runner came by, some poor bastard who'd survived this long crawling trench to trench. He told us to wait for the next whistle, then push forward to the German wire. Try to find a gap, get into their trenches. I didn't want to hear another whistle, ever. But I knew it was coming. When it came, we went. The 3 of us left alive, scrambled out of that crater and ran. The German trenches were closer now. I could see their helmets, see the muzzle flashes from their positions. A shell landed 10 feet away. The concussion threw me sideways into the mud. My ears were ringing so loud I couldn't hear the guns anymore. Couldn't hear anything. Just this high-pitched whine that filled my head. I got up, don't know how, kept moving forward, made it to their wire, found a gap that had been blown open by artillery, jumped down into their trench. It was hand to hand then. Bayonets, knives, rifle butts, fists. Men screaming in German, in English, in languages I didn't recognize. The trench was narrow, packed with bodies, slippery with blood. I killed a man. Young German soldier, maybe younger than Eddie. He came at me and I put my bayonet in his stomach. Felt it go in, felt him die on the end of my rifle. His eyes were blue, I remember that. Blue eyes, wide with surprise, then empty. We cleared that section of trench, held it for 3 hours before they counterattacked and we had to pull back. Back across that killing field, leaving our dead behind. Eddie Kowalski was still out there, never did marry his sweetheart. They blew the whistles again 2 days later, and 3 days after that, and again through that summer of 1918. Each time fewer of us came back, you stop learning names after a while. What's the point? They're replacements, fresh meat, and they'll be dead in a week anyway. Some of them would ask us veterans what it was like, what to expect. We'd just look at them. Couldn't find the words. Wouldn't have helped if we did. The worst was waiting for it. Sitting in the trench, knowing the attack was coming. Watching the officers check their watches. Hearing them take out their whistles. The waiting was agony. Your guts would clench up. Your heart would pound so hard you thought it would burst. Some men would lose control of their bowels. Nobody made fun of them for it. Then that shrill sound would cut through the air and you'd have to go. Again. Always again. I started hearing whistles in my sleep. In the brief moments when you could sleep, when the shelling died down and exhaustion finally dragged you under, you'd dream that whistle and wake up screaming, reaching for your rifle. In September, we were part of the Meuse-Argonne offensive, biggest American operation of the war. Over 1 million of us thrown into the meat grinder. The whistles blew every day for 6 weeks. I got through it on instinct. You become an animal. Stop thinking, stop feeling, just react. Hear the whistle, climb the ladder, run into the fire. If you survive, you do it again the next day. Lost track of how many times I went over the top. 10, 20. Each one blurred into the next. Different stretches of torn up earth, different dead friends left behind, but always the same whistle calling us forward. My sergeant, guy named Miller from Ohio, he cracked in October. Heard the whistle and just froze. Couldn't move. They had to drag him back to the rear. Last I saw, he was rocking back and forth, hands over his ears, crying like a child. I envied him. At least his war was over. Mine kept going. The whistles kept blowing. November 10th, 1918. One day before the armistice, though we didn't know it then, they told us to take a German position. One more push, one more attack. The whistles would blow at 0700. I was so tired I couldn't feel my legs. We'd been fighting for 4 months straight. I'd stopped counting the dead, stopped remembering faces. I was hollow inside, just a shell of a man going through the motions, but I could still hear. And when the lieutenant pulled out that whistle, something inside me snapped. I grabbed his wrist, looked him right in the eye. "No," I said, "not again." He stared at me. The other men in the trench went quiet. "That's an order, Private," he said. "I don't care." He could have shot me right there, court-martialed me. But something in my face must have told him I was beyond caring, beyond fear. I'd used up all my fear months ago. Then we heard it. Not our whistle, theirs. The Germans were blowing their whistles, not to attack, but to signal something else. Men were shouting. Officers were running up and down the line. Ceasefire. Armistice. It was over. The lieutenant put his whistle back in his pocket. We stood there in that trench, covered in mud and blood and God knows what else, and nobody knew what to do. Some men cheered, some cried. I just sat down in the mud and stared at nothing. It was over. We'd won, they told us. Victory. But I couldn't stop hearing those whistles. Even in the silence, I heard them. Heard them calling the dead to climb up and attack one more time. Heard Eddie Kowalski and all the rest, still running toward the German guns forever. That's when I understood. The war might be over, but the whistles would never stop. Not for me. Not for any of us who'd heard them. We'd survived. We'd go home. But we'd never really leave those trenches. The whistles would follow us forever. I came home in March of 1919. Heroes Welcome, they called it. Parade down Main Street, everyone cheering, people shaking my hand. My mother cried happy tears. My father looked proud. I smiled and nodded and played my part. But I wasn't really there. Part of me was still in France, still in that mud, still hearing those whistles. I got a job at the hardware store. Married a nice girl named Helen in 1921. Had 2 kids. Did all the things you're supposed to do. Built a normal life. But I was never normal again. Certain sounds would set me off. A train whistle, a referee's whistle at a baseball game, even a tea kettle. Helen learned not to use the kettle when I was home. She never asked why, bless her. Maybe she knew. I'd be at work measuring out nails or cutting rope, and suddenly I'd be back in that trench waiting for the whistle. My hands would start shaking. Sweat would pour down my face. I'd have to go to the back room until it passed, and the nightmares never stopped. 3, 4 times a week I'd wake up screaming, hearing that shrill sound, seeing the ladder, feeling the mud. Helen would hold me until I stopped shaking, but we both knew she couldn't reach the place I went. I tried talking to other veterans. We'd gather sometimes, share a bottle, try to explain it to each other. But what was there to say? They knew. We all knew. The whistles had broken something inside us that could never be fixed. My son asked me about the war once. He was maybe 10 years old, doing a school project. "Were you brave, Dad? Did you win medals?" I didn't know how to answer him. How do you tell your child that bravery wasn't climbing that ladder? It was having no choice? That the medals mean nothing when you remember the faces of the dead? I did my duty, I told him. It was all I could manage. They're recording this now, these young historians who want to preserve our stories before we're all gone. They ask about battles, tactics, dates. But I keep coming back to the whistles. That sound was the dividing line. Everything before it was life. Everything after was survival. 40 years on, I still hear them. When I close my eyes, when I'm alone, in the quiet moments between heartbeats. That sharp, clean note that meant death was waiting and you had to go meet it. People thank me for my service. They call us the greatest generation, heroes who saved the world. But they don't understand. We didn't save anything. We just died over and over, and some of us had the bad luck to keep breathing. The boy from Iowa who thought war was an adventure, he died the first time he heard that whistle blow. What came back was something else. Something that looks like a man, talks like a man, goes through the motions of living. But inside, I'm still in that trench, still waiting, and the whistle is about to blow.